forced to marry a paralyzed CEO. She gave him her first time. Now he won't stop. Hey loves, welcome back to Dr. Tom's Love Tales. Today's story, I truly poured my heart into it. Every scene, every word, just for you. So, grab a cozy spot, relax, and let yourself get lost in this journey. As you're listening, please drop a comment to let us know what time it is and where in the world you're watching from. I absolutely love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story touches your heart even just a little, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us grow and reach more beautiful souls like you. Now, let's dive in. The small apartment in Chicago's South Side told a story of dreams deferred and promises broken. Paint tubes scattered across a makeshift desk, canvases stacked against peeling wallpaper, and the constant smell of turpentine mixed with instant coffee. This was Diana Dawson's world. At 24, she had the kind of artistic talent that professors whispered about in art schools. But talent doesn't pay rent in a city that chews up dreamers and spits out disappointment. "Diana, get out here!" Her father's voice cut through the thin walls of her bedroom-turned studio. "We need to talk." She set down her brush, wiping paint-stained fingers on her already ruined jeans. The canvas she'd been working on, a landscape that seemed to breathe with life, would have to wait. Again, everything always had to wait when her father called. The living room was a study in contrasts. Her stepsister Melissa lounged on the expensive leather couch that somehow looked out of place among the second-hand furniture, scrolling through her phone with perfectly manicured nails. Designer bags from her latest shopping spree cluttered the coffee table, while unpaid bills lay scattered beneath them like accusations. "Finally," Melissa said, without looking up, her voice dripping with the kind of disdain that had become second nature over the years. "Dad has something important to discuss with you." Their father, David Dawson, sat hunched over a stack of papers at the dining table. His once proud shoulders now permanently curved from the weight of his mistakes. The man who had once owned a successful restaurant chain now couldn't meet his daughter's eyes as she entered the room. "What's going on?" Diana asked, noticing the tension that seemed to fill every corner of the cramped space. "Sit down, sweetheart," her father said, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant bad news was coming. "We have a situation." Diana remained standing, her artist's instincts picking up on the subtle details others might miss. The way Melissa's mouth curved in anticipation, the tremor in her father's hands, the official-looking documents spread across the table, like evidence of some crime. What kind of situation? Melissa finally looked up from her phone, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the calculating gleam in her eyes. "The kind that's going to save this family from complete ruin." "Melissa, please," their father interrupted, shooting her a warning look. "Let me handle this." "Handle what?" Diana's voice rose slightly, her patience wearing thin. She had deadlines to meet, art to create, a career to build, or at least attempt to build, despite the constant financial pressure that made purchasing quality supplies nearly impossible. Her father gestured to the papers on the table. "There's been an arrangement made, a business opportunity that will solve all our problems." "What kind of business opportunity involves me sitting down for a family meeting?" Diana moved closer to the table, trying to read the documents upside down. The letterhead was expensive-looking, official, but the words were too small to make out clearly. "A marriage arrangement," her father said quickly, as if saying it fast would somehow make it less shocking. The words hit Diana like cold water. "An arranged marriage," Melissa said, her voice bright with false cheer. "Isn't that exciting? You're going to be a bride." Diana felt the room tilt around her. "You can't be serious, Dad." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, but the devastation in it was unmistakable. "Now, before you get upset," her father began, finally meeting her eyes, "let me explain the benefits." "Benefits?" Diana's voice found its strength again. "You're talking about selling me to a stranger, and you want to discuss benefits?" "It's not selling," her father protested weakly. "It's an arranged marriage. A business transaction that will save our family." "A business transaction?" Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitter disbelief. "You mean you're trading me like cattle because you can't manage your debts?" Melissa stood up from the couch, smoothing down her designer dress with theatrical grace. "Actually, I was supposed to marry him," she said with mock sympathy. "But when I saw he was disabled, well, I couldn't possibly. So we thought of you." The casual cruelty of the statement hit Diana harder than any physical blow could have. "He's in a wheelchair," her father explained, avoiding her gaze again. "Lost his legs in some accident as a child. Poor man probably can't even, well, you know, it'll be an easy marriage, Diana. Just care for him, and he'll provide for us." "So, you chose me," Diana said slowly, understanding dawning like a sick sunrise. "Because you think I'm desperate enough to marry a man you consider damaged goods. That's not how we see it." Her father tried to protest. "That's exactly how you see it," Diana shot back. "Melissa gets to reject him because she's too good for a disabled man. But poor Diana, she should be grateful for any husband at all, right?" Melissa's expression shifted to something almost predatory. "The contract is signed," she said coldly. "Caleb Steele expects his bride tomorrow. Think of it as charity work." "Caleb Steele?" The name stopped Diana cold. She'd heard it before, whispered in the halls of the Art Institute of Chicago. "The art collector?" Her father looked confused. "Art collector? We were told he inherited some money, but lives like a hermit because of his condition." Something didn't add right. Caleb Steele wasn't just any collector. He was legendary among art circles, known for acquiring pieces worth millions, for having an eye that could spot genius in unknown artists. Why would such a man need an arranged marriage with a struggling artist's daughter? "You don't know anything about him, do you?" Diana asked, her mind racing. "You just signed a contract to marry me off to a complete stranger." "We know enough," Melissa interjected. "He's disabled, probably lonely, and willing to pay our family's debts in exchange for a wife who'll take care of him. It's a perfect arrangement." "Perfect for whom?" Diana's voice cracked with emotion. "Did anyone think to ask what I want? Did anyone consider that I might have dreams, goals, a life I'm trying to build?" Her father's face crumpled slightly. "Your art. It's not paying the bills, sweetheart. The restaurant is gone, the house is mortgaged beyond repair, and the creditors are circling like sharks. This marriage, it's our only option." "Your only option," Diana corrected. "This is your solution to your gambling problem, your failed business ventures, your poor decisions, and I'm the one who has to pay the price." "We all have to make sacrifices," Melissa said, examining her nails with studied indifference. "At least you'll be taken care of. Some women would be grateful for the security." "Some women," Diana repeated, her voice deadly quiet, "weren't raised by a father who once told them they could be anything they wanted, only to sell them to the highest bidder when times got tough." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Melissa seemed to sense she'd pushed too far, while their father looked like a man watching his own soul die. "The papers are signed," he said finally, his voice hollow. "The arrangements are made. I'm sorry, Diana, but there's no going back now." That night, Diana sat in her room, surrounded by every piece of information she could find about Caleb Steele. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness as she scrolled through article after article, auction records, art magazine features that mentioned him only in passing. The picture that emerged was fascinating and contradictory. Caleb Steele was indeed a major collector, with pieces in his private collection worth more than most people's houses. He'd acquired works by Van Gogh, Monet, Picasso, masters whose paintings hung in the world's greatest museums. Yet he never appeared publicly, never attended gallery openings, never showed his face at auctions. "Reclusive millionaire," one article called him. "The phantom collector who buys masterpieces but never displays them." Another piece mentioned his tragic backstory. Juz, a car accident at age 3 that had claimed his mother's life and left him permanently disabled. His mother, the article noted, had been a talented landscape artist whose work was just beginning to gain recognition when she died. Diana stared at a reproduction of one of his mother's paintings, a breathtaking landscape that seemed to capture not just the visual beauty of nature, but its emotional essence. The woman had been truly gifted, and losing her so young must have been devastating for a child. But none of this explained why a man with such wealth and influence would resort to an arranged marriage. Surely someone of his status could find companionship without resorting to what amounted to purchasing a bride from a desperate family. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Car will pick you up at 10 a.m. Pack light. New life, new beginning, new beginning." The words felt like ashes in her mouth. This wasn't a new beginning. It was the end of everything she'd worked toward, everything she'd dreamed of becoming. She looked around her small room one last time, at the paintings stacked against every wall, at the easel holding her unfinished landscape, at the art supplies that had been her companions through every difficult moment of her young life. Tomorrow, she would leave all of this behind, to become wife to a man she'd never met, in a transaction that treated her like property rather than a person. The black sedan that arrived the next morning was nothing like the modest vehicle Diana had expected. The leather interior was pristine, the driver professional and courteous, and the route they took led them away from the struggling neighborhoods she knew toward areas of Chicago she'd only seen in magazines. "Excuse me," she called to the driver through the partition. "Are you sure we have the right address?" "Caleb Steele residence," the driver confirmed. "Lake Forest. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Lake Forest. Diana's heart began to race. Lake Forest wasn't where struggling invalids lived in modest homes. Lake Forest was where Chicago's elite built mansions that required staff to maintain. As they drove through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, Diana's confusion grew into something approaching panic. The houses grew larger, the lawns more manicured, the gates more imposing. This wasn't the world of someone who needed financial help through marriage. This was the world of people who could buy and sell struggling families without thinking twice about it. When they finally turned through massive iron gates and began the long drive up to the Steele mansion, Diana's breath caught in her throat. The house, no, estate, that rose before them was nothing short of palatial. Glass and steel architecture that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime, surrounded by gardens that looked like they required a team of professionals to maintain. "There must be some mistake," she whispered to herself, but even as she said it, she knew there wasn't. The car stopped in front of massive front doors that looked like they belonged in a castle. A uniformed butler was waiting, as if her arrival had been precisely timed and choreographed. "Miss Dawson," he said as he opened her door, his voice carrying the kind of refined accent that spoke of expensive education and exclusive service. "Mr. Steele is waiting for you in the garden room, if you'll follow me." As Diana walked through the front doors and into the mansion, she realized with dawning horror that everything her family had told her was a lie. This wasn't a modest arrangement with a struggling invalid. This wasn't charity work or a simple business transaction. This was something else entirely, and she was walking into it completely unprepared for whatever truth awaited her in the garden room. The hallways seemed to stretch forever, lined with artwork that Diana recognized from her art history textbooks, originals that belonged in museums, not private homes. Whatever Caleb Steele was, he wasn't the man her family had described, and as she approached the garden room where he waited, Diana realized she was about to meet either her salvation or her doom. My amazing family, if you made it this far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps YouTube push our story to more people. It cost you just 1 second to do so. Now let's continue. The garden room was a masterpiece of glass and light. where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed meticulously maintained grounds that stretched as far as the eye could see. Easels stood like silent sentinels throughout the space, some holding blank canvases, others draped with cloth as if hiding secrets. The air carried the faint scent of oil paints and turpentine, familiar smells that made Diana's heart ache with longing for her own abandoned studio. "Mr. Steele?" the butler announced, his voice carrying the practiced formality of years in service. "Your fiancé has arrived." A wheelchair turned slowly from where it had been positioned near the far windows, and Diana felt her breath catch in her throat. The man facing her bore no resemblance to the pitiful invalid her family had described. Caleb Steele was devastatingly handsome in a way that belonged on magazine covers. Sharp cheekbones, perfectly styled dark hair, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. But there was something broken in those eyes, a depth of pain that no amount of wealth could heal. "Miss Dawson," he said, his voice deep and controlled, carrying just a hint of warmth beneath its measured tone. "Welcome to your new home." Diana stood frozen in the doorway, her mind struggling to reconcile the reality before her with everything she'd been told. This wasn't a desperate man grateful for any companionship. This was someone who could have any woman he wanted, if he chose to want them. "Mr. Steele," she managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My family was told you needed care, that this was a modest arrangement." A bitter smile crossed his perfectly sculpted features. "Modest? I suppose that depends on one's perspective. Please, sit down." She moved to perch on the edge of an antique chair that probably cost more than her family's monthly rent, still trying to process the opulence surrounding her. "You're wealthy. Very wealthy. Why would you agree to an arranged marriage with a complete stranger?" Caleb's expression darkened, and for a moment, the careful control slipped to reveal something raw and vulnerable underneath. "Because I'm a cripple, Miss Dawson. A broken man who will never walk, never dance at his own wedding, never be whole. Your family was told the truth. I do need someone to care for me. The money is irrelevant." The brutal honesty in his voice made Diana's chest tighten unexpectedly. She'd expected coldness, perhaps arrogance, but not this stark vulnerability from a man who clearly had the world at his financial fingertips. "But surely you could find someone who wanted to be here," she said gently, surprising herself with the compassion in her tone. "Someone who chose this life willingly." Caleb laughed, but the sound held no joy. "Could I? I've seen how women look at me, Miss Dawson. Pity, disgust, or barely concealed calculations about my bank account. At least with you, I know exactly what this is. A business arrangement where both parties benefit. And what exactly do I get out of this arrangement?" Caleb gestured toward the art-filled space around them, his movements graceful despite his position in the wheelchair. "You get to pursue your passion surrounded by the finest art collection in the country. You get financial security your family desperately needs. And you get to help a broken man remember what it's like to have someone care, even if that caring is purchased rather than freely given." Something in his voice, a note of genuine longing beneath the cynicism, made Diana's heart ache in ways she didn't expect. "What happened to you?" Caleb was quiet for so long that Diana thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Car accident when I was 3 years old. I lost my legs in the crash. And I lost my mother. She died on impact, while I was trapped in the wreckage for hours." Listening to her voice grow weaker until it finally stopped, the stark pain in his words hit Diana like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry. She was an artist, you know." Caleb continued, his gaze drifting to a corner where several canvases sat covered with white cloth. "Painted the most beautiful landscapes, scenes that seemed to breathe with life. I used to love drawing with her, sitting at her feet while she worked, learning to see the world through an artist's eyes." His voice cracked slightly. "After she died, I couldn't. I haven't touched a brush in 25 years. Don't pity me," he added sharply. noticing the expression on Diana's face. "I have everything money can buy. I just can't buy back what matters most." "Your ability to walk?" Diana asked softly. "My ability to feel," Caleb corrected, his eyes meeting hers with startling intensity. To believe that someone could see past this wheelchair and love the man inside it. The wedding took place 3 days later in the mansion's private chapel. A small ceremony that felt more like a business meeting than a celebration of love. Diana wore a simple ivory dress she'd chosen herself, elegant but understated, a reflection of her artist's eye for clean lines and natural beauty. Caleb looked magnificent in his tailored black suit. Every inch the successful businessman, despite the wheelchair that had become as much a part of him as his piercing blue eyes. As they exchanged vows, Diana noticed Caleb's hands trembling slightly. When he placed the platinum ring on her finger, the metal was warm from his touch, and she found herself studying his face as he spoke the traditional words that would bind them together. There was uncertainty there, carefully hidden beneath his practiced composure, as if he couldn't quite believe this moment was real. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced. Caleb hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his features. For a moment, he looked less like the confident businessman and more like a man terrified of rejection. Diana made the decision for both of them, leaning down to brush her lips gently against his. The kiss was meant to be brief, ceremonial. But the moment their lips touched, something unexpected happened. Warmth spread through Diana's body like sunlight, and she felt Caleb's sharp intake of breath against her mouth. When they parted, both were staring at each other with something approaching wonder. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips, his voice rough with emotion, "for giving me this chance." That evening, as Diana explored her new living quarters, a suite of rooms that was larger and more luxurious than any home she'd ever known, she found herself thinking about that kiss. She'd expected it to feel cold, obligatory, but instead it had felt like a promise of something neither of them had anticipated. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Caleb waited in the hallway, still in his wedding attire but with his tie loosened and his hair slightly mussed. "I wanted to show you something," he said, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "If you're willing." She followed him through the mansion's winding corridors, to a room she hadn't seen before. When he opened the door, Diana gasped. The space was filled with art supplies that belonged in a professional studio, easels of every size, paints in colors she'd only dreamed of owning, brushes crafted by master artisans, and canvases stretched to perfection. "I had it prepared for you," Caleb said, watching her face carefully. "I know your art means everything to you. I didn't want this marriage to mean you had to give up your dreams." Diana moved through the studio in wonder, her fingers trailing over supplies that cost more than she'd made in the past year. "You did this for me. Your work deserves the finest tools," Caleb replied simply. "I've seen your paintings, Diana. You have a gift that shouldn't be wasted on cheap materials and cramped spaces." "You've seen my work?" She turned to face him, surprised. A faint flush colored Caleb's cheeks. "I may have researched you before agreeing to this arrangement. Your professor showed me some of your pieces. You paint with the same passion my mother did. As if you're trying to capture not just what something looks like, but what it feels like to be alive." The comparison to his mother made Diana's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Show me her paintings," she said impulsively. "Please." Caleb's expression shifted, becoming guarded again. "They're not. I haven't looked at them in years." "Then maybe it's time," Diana said gently. "You don't have to do it alone." Something in her tone seemed to reach him. After a long moment, he nodded toward the covered canvases in the corner. "She finished these just weeks before the accident. I had them moved here when I couldn't bear to see them anymore. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of them either." Together, they approached the shrouded paintings. Caleb's hands shook slightly as he reached for the first cloth, and Diana instinctively placed her hand over his. "Together," she said softly. They pulled away the covering to reveal a landscape that took Diana's breath away. The painting showed a meadow at sunset, but it was more than just a visual representation. It captured the very essence of peace, of a moment suspended in golden light where the world felt perfect and full of possibility. She was incredible, Diana whispered, studying the brushwork that showed not just technical skill but deep emotional intelligence. You can see her love for life in every stroke. She used to say that art was about showing people how to see beauty in ordinary moments, Caleb said, his voice thick with memory. That every sunset was worth celebrating, every flower worth noticing. She sounds wonderful. She was everything to me, Caleb admitted. After she died, I felt like the color had been drained from the world. I tried to draw, to paint, to feel that connection to her again, but nothing came out right. So I stopped trying. Diana studied his profile as he stared at his mother's painting, seeing the little boy he must have been, traumatized, grieving, shutting down the part of himself that hurt too much to bear. Maybe, she said carefully, the problem wasn't that you couldn't paint like her. Maybe the problem was that you were trying to paint like her instead of painting like you. Caleb turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. What do you mean? Your mother painted joy and light because that was her truth, Diana explained. But your truth is different. You've experienced loss, pain, isolation. That doesn't make your artistic voice less valuable. It makes it uniquely yours. For several weeks after that conversation, they fell into a routine that surprised them both with its natural rhythm. Caleb would spend his mornings managing his business empire from his home office, while Diana painted in her studio. But the evenings belonged to them both. Long dinners, where they talked about everything from art to philosophy. Quiet moments in the library, where Caleb would read while Diana sketched, and slowly building conversations that revealed more about who they really were beneath the circumstances that had brought them together. Caleb was endlessly thoughtful in ways that caught Diana off guard. He had rare pigments flown in from Italy when she mentioned wanting to experiment with certain colors. He arranged for her favorite coffee to be imported from a small roaster in Guatemala. He listened with genuine interest when she talked about her artistic process, asking questions that showed he understood not just the technical aspects, but the emotional journey of creation. You don't have to do all this, Diana said one evening as she discovered he'd had an entire wall converted to display her paintings. Not hidden away, but prominently featured where anyone entering the house would see them first. Why not? Caleb replied, genuine confusion in his voice. Your work deserves to be seen and celebrated. Watching you paint, seeing the joy on your face when you create something new, it's the closest I've come to feeling truly alive in years. The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. But that night, as they sat together in the garden room watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Diana made a decision that would change everything. Paint with me, she said suddenly. Caleb stiffened. Diana, I told you. Kenna, I know what you told me, she interrupted gently. But I also know what I see when you look at my work. You still have that artist's eye, Caleb. You see things differently than other people do. The only thing stopping you from creating is fear. Fear of what? Fear of feeling again, Diana said softly. Fear of connecting to that part of your mother that lives inside you. Fear of discovering that the pain and the beauty can coexist. She moved to get a small canvas and set it on an easel beside his wheelchair, then placed a brush in his hand. You don't have to paint her landscapes. Paint what you see now. Paint what you feel. Caleb stared at the blank canvas for a long moment, the brush trembling in his grip. Then, slowly, he touched it to the paint and made his first mark in 25 years. What emerged wasn't technically perfect, but it was honest. Dark blues and grays that spoke of loneliness, shot through with unexpected threads of gold that seemed to represent hope, trying to break through despair. As he painted, Diana saw years of suppressed emotion flowing onto the canvas. and when he finally set down the brush, there were tears in his eyes. "I'd forgotten," he whispered, staring at what he'd created. "I'd forgotten how it feels to let something out instead of holding it all inside." That night, standing close enough to share breath as they both stared at his first painting in decades, something fundamental shifted between them. When Caleb turned to look at her, Diana saw not the guarded businessman or the wounded boy, but simply a man who was learning to hope again. This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't ceremonial or uncertain. It was filled with gratitude and wonder and the beginning of something that neither of them had expected, but both were finally ready to explore. The transformation in Caleb over the following weeks was nothing short of remarkable. What began as tentative brushstrokes on canvas evolved into hours spent side by side in the garden room, two artists finding their rhythm together. Diana would work on her landscapes, while Caleb explored the darker emotions he'd buried for so long, his paintings becoming windows into a soul learning to heal. "You're getting your color back," Diana observed one morning, studying his latest work, a piece that showed storm clouds breaking apart to reveal brilliant sunlight beneath. Caleb looked up from his canvas, paint smudged on his cheek in a way that made him look years younger. "I feel like I'm remembering how to breathe again," he admitted. "For 25 years, I've been holding my breath, waiting for something to change. Now, watching you creating alongside you, it's like the world has possibility again." Their conversations during these painting sessions revealed layers of each other that neither had expected to share. Caleb spoke about the loneliness of growing up as a disabled child in a world that saw his wheelchair before it saw him. Diana talked about feeling invisible in her own family, always coming second to Melissa's beauty and charm. "I used to think my value was tied to what I could produce," Diana said one evening, mixing colors on her palette. "How many paintings I could sell, how much money I could contribute to the family. It took coming here to realize that maybe I have worth just as I am." "You do," Caleb said quietly, setting down his brush to really look at her. "You have this light inside you, Diana. It shows in your art, in the way you talk about things you're passionate about, in how you made me believe I could create again. You're extraordinary." The compliment sent warmth through her chest, and when she met his eyes, she saw something there that made her heart race. This wasn't gratitude or convenience anymore. This was something deeper, more dangerous. But it was during one of their late-night conversations in the library that everything changed. They'd been discussing a book about Renaissance artists when Caleb grew quiet, staring into the fireplace with an expression of deep contemplation. "What are you thinking about?" Diana asked from her chair across from him. "I'm thinking about how much my life has changed since you arrived," he said slowly. "I'm thinking about how I wake up each morning actually looking forward to the day instead of just enduring it. Caleb, I'm thinking," he continued, turning his wheelchair to face her fully, "about how I never believed I could feel this way about another person, about how you've made me want things I thought were impossible." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. Diana's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized they were approaching a line that, once crossed, would change everything. "What kind of things?" she whispered. "I want to be the kind of man who deserves your love," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to give you everything you've ever dreamed of. I want to wake up every morning for the next 50 years and watch you create beautiful things." Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "Caleb, you already are that man." "Am I?" He moved his wheelchair closer, reaching out to take her hand. "Because I have to tell you something, and I'm terrified of how you'll react." "Tell me." "I love you," he said simply, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Not because of our arrangement, not because you've been kind to a broken man, but because you're brilliant and passionate, and you see beauty in everything, even in me. I love you, Diana, and I know I have no right to ask for it in return. But you love me?" She interrupted, her voice barely a breath, completely, desperately. "In a way that makes me want to be better than I am." Diana felt something break open in her chest. not painful, but like a flower blooming after a long winter. "I love you too," she whispered, watching his eyes widen in wonder. "I love your brilliant mind, your generous heart, the way you've supported my dreams without trying to change them. I love how you make me laugh, how you challenge me to think differently about art and life and everything in between." When he kissed her this time, it was with the desperation of a man who had never expected to be loved and the tenderness of someone who understood how precious the gift was. And when they broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "I want to give you everything," Caleb said, resting his forehead against hers. "I want to dance with you at gallery openings. I want to travel the world and show you art in the cities where it was created. I want to be whole for you." "You are whole," Diana said firmly. "You're perfect exactly as you are." But even as she said it, she could see something shifting in Caleb's expression, a determination that both thrilled and worried her. The next morning, Diana found Caleb in his office, surrounded by medical journals and research papers, his laptop open to what appeared to be a leading neurological institute's website. "What's all this?" she asked. Settling into the chair across from his desk, Caleb looked up, and she could see excitement and fear warring in his expression. "I've been researching my condition. There have been advances in spinal cord injury treatment, experimental procedures that weren't available when I was younger." Diana's heart began to race. "What kind of procedures?" "Nerve grafting, stem cell therapy, electrical stimulation devices," Caleb said, his voice gaining momentum as he spoke. "There's a clinic in Switzerland that's had remarkable success with cases like mine. Not guaranteed, but there's a chance." "A chance for what?" "A chance that I could walk again," Caleb said quietly. "A chance that I could be the husband you deserve." "Caleb, no," Diana said immediately, moving around the desk to take his hands. "I don't need you to walk. I need you exactly as you are." "But what if I could be more?" he asked, his eyes bright with hope and determination. "What if we could have everything, Diana? What if I could take you dancing? Could stand beside you at your gallery shows? And what if the surgery fails?" Diana interrupted, her voice sharp with sudden fear. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you entirely trying to fix something that isn't broken?" Caleb stared at her for a long moment, seeming to really see the terror in her eyes. "You're afraid." "Of course I'm afraid," she said, tears beginning to fall. "I just found you, Caleb. I just found this love that I never expected to have. The thought of risking it for something I don't even need. But I need it," Caleb said softly. "I need to know that I tried everything to be worthy of you." "You're already worthy," Diana said desperately. "You're already everything I want." Caleb pulled her onto his lap, holding her close as she cried against his shoulder. "Hey," he whispered, his hands gentle in her hair. "Hey, look at me." When she raised her tear-stained face to his, he cupped her cheeks tenderly. "I love you more than my own life," he said, "but I need to try this. Not because you're not enough, but because I want to give you everything I possibly can. I want to spend the rest of our lives creating new possibilities together." Diana searched his face, seeing the determination there that she'd come to recognize. This wasn't a whim or a desperate grasp at normalcy. This was a carefully considered decision from a man who had spent his entire adult life accepting limitations. "Promise me something," she said finally. "Anything. Promise me that if I say yes to this, you'll remember that I love you regardless of the outcome. Promise me that whether you walk out of that hospital or wheel out, you'll still be my husband, my partner, my everything." "I promise," Caleb said, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted of tears and hope and the kind of love that changes everything. The preparation for the surgery consumed the next 2 months. Caleb threw himself into physical therapy to strengthen his upper body for the procedure, while Diana researched everything she could about the clinic in Switzerland and the experimental treatment he would undergo. Dr. Werner, the lead surgeon, was cautiously optimistic during their video consultations. "Mr. Steele's case is complex," he explained in his precise accent. The initial trauma occurred when he was very young, which means there's been significant adaptation over the years. However, recent advances in nerve regeneration give us hope that partial function could be restored. What does partial function mean? Diana asked, gripping Caleb's hand tightly. In the best-case scenario, he could regain enough sensation and muscle control to walk with assistance. In the worst case, Dr. Werner's expression grew somber. There are always risks with spinal surgery, infection, further nerve damage, or complications from anesthesia. The night before they were scheduled to fly to Switzerland, Diana found Caleb on the terrace of their bedroom, staring out at the gardens that had become the backdrop for their love story. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his wheelchair. "Terrified thoughts," he admitted. "What if this changes us? What if I'm not the same person when I wake up? Then we'll figure out who you are together," Diana said simply. "We'll create new art, new memories, new dreams. The only thing that would change us is if we let fear win." The surgery itself lasted 14 hours. Diana spent every minute in the waiting room, alternating between pacing and sitting motionless, her sketchbook in her lap as she drew countless portraits of Caleb from memory. Laughing, painting, sleeping peacefully in the morning light. When Dr. Werner finally emerged, his expression was carefully neutral. "The surgery went well," he said. "We were able to repair more nerve pathways than we initially expected, but it will be weeks before we know the extent of functionality he'll regain." The recovery was brutal. Caleb spent days drifting in and out of consciousness, machines monitoring every vital sign, while Diana maintained her vigil beside his bed. When he was finally alert enough to speak, his first words were, "Are you still here? Where else would I be?" she asked, taking his hand gently. "I thought maybe you'd come to your senses and run away while I was unconscious," he said weakly, but his eyes were bright with love. "Not a chance," Diana replied, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "You're stuck with me, Steele." The physical therapy was excruciating to watch. Day after day, Caleb worked with therapists to rebuild neural pathways that had been dormant for decades. There were setbacks, days when he couldn't feel anything below his waist, moments when the pain was so intense he could barely speak, but there were also miracles. 3 weeks after surgery, Caleb felt sensation in his left toe. A week later, he could move his ankle. By the 6th week, he was able to support some of his weight with parallel bars. "I can feel the ground," he told Diana one afternoon, tears streaming down his face as he stood between the bars with a therapist supporting each arm. "I can actually feel the ground beneath my feet." But it was week 8 that brought the moment they'd both dreamed of and feared in equal measure. Caleb had been working with the parallel bars when he suddenly let go of the supports and took 3 shaky, unsteady steps toward Diana. She was across the room in an instant, catching him as his legs gave out, both of them crying and laughing as they sank to the floor together. "I walked to you," he whispered against her hair. "I actually walked to you." "You did," she sobbed, holding him tightly. "You did, my love." That evening, alone in his hospital room, Caleb stood carefully and pulled Diana into his arms. They swayed together slowly, barely moving, but it was everything they'd dreamed of. Their first dance as husband and wife, earned through months of pain and hope and unwavering love. The news of Caleb's recovery spread faster than they had anticipated. What they had hoped to keep private became public knowledge when a nurse at the clinic posted about the miracle patient on social media. Within days, business publications were running stories about the reclusive billionaire who had regained the ability to walk, and society magazines were speculating about his mysterious wife. Back in Chicago, the news reached Diana's family with devastating impact on their carefully constructed narratives. Melissa was having lunch with friends at an upscale restaurant when one of them showed her a gossip magazine article about Caleb Steele and his art restorer wife. The photograph, taken secretly during one of their walks through the clinic's gardens, showed Caleb standing tall and strong beside a radiant Diana. "Isn't this your sister?" her friend asked. "The one who married the disabled man?" Melissa's face went white as she read the article detailing Caleb's vast wealth, his art collection worth hundreds of millions, and his successful recovery from the experimental surgery. "There's been a mistake," she said faintly. But even as she spoke, she was calculating how quickly she could get to the Steele mansion. Meanwhile, David Dawson was in his local bar when the bartender turned up the volume on the entertainment news segment. Billionaire Caleb Steele, seen here with his wife Diana Dawson Steele, has made a remarkable recovery from experimental spinal surgery in Switzerland. The couple, who married in a private ceremony last year, are reportedly planning to establish a foundation for spinal cord research. David nearly choked on his beer as he stared at the screen. Billionaire. His daughter had married a billionaire, and he'd been so focused on just getting out of debt that he'd never bothered to research exactly who Caleb Steele was. By the time Caleb and Diana returned to Chicago, both Melissa and David were already making plans to re-establish their relationships with the woman they'd been so eager to discard when she was merely a burden to be managed. The first sign of trouble came in the form of flowers, massive, expensive arrangements that arrived daily with cards expressing love and regret from family members who had made their position clear just months earlier. "Your father called my assistant 16 times today," Caleb told Diana as they sat in their garden room, both working on new paintings inspired by their time in Switzerland. "And your sister has been asking the staff when you'll be receiving visitors." Diana's brush stilled on her canvas. "They know. About my recovery? About the money?" "Yes. I don't want to see them," Diana said quietly. "Is that terrible of me?" Caleb set down his brush and moved to stand behind her chair, his hands resting gently on her shoulders, a simple gesture that still filled him with wonder. "It's not terrible at all. They made their feelings about you very clear when they thought I was just a disabled man with modest means. You don't owe them anything now that the situation has changed." But even as he said it, they both knew that this was only the beginning. The family that had been so eager to trade Diana away would not be easily dismissed now that they understood exactly what they had given up, and the battles ahead would test everything they had built together during their months of healing and growth. The happiness they had fought so hard to create was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The doorbell rang on a crisp autumn morning while Diana and Caleb were having breakfast on the terrace, sharing the newspaper and planning their day in the studio. Caleb had been walking for 3 months now, though he still used a cane for longer distances. And their morning walks through the gardens had become a cherished routine. "Sir?" The butler approached with obvious discomfort. "There's a young woman at the door claiming to be Mrs. Steele's sister. She's quite insistent." Diana's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "Melissa, shall I tell her you're not receiving visitors?" Caleb asked, his hand moving protectively to cover hers. Before Diana could answer, the sound of heels clicking rapidly across marble floors announced that Melissa had bypassed the butler entirely. She appeared on the terrace like a force of nature, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her perfectly styled hair and makeup creating a portrait of calculated elegance. But it was the expression on her face that stopped everyone cold, a mixture of shock, hunger, and barely concealed desperation as she took in the opulent surroundings and, more importantly, Caleb standing tall and strong beside his wife. "Well, well," Melissa said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Look at this beautiful reunion. My dear sister and her miraculous husband." Caleb remained standing, one hand on his cane, the other still protectively covering Diana's. His business mask had slipped into place, polite but cold, the expression of a man who had dealt with countless people trying to use him over the years. "Melissa," Diana managed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" Melissa laughed, moving closer to get a better look at Caleb. "I'm here to see my beloved sister and meet my new brother-in-law properly. I have to say, the photos in the magazines didn't do you justice, Caleb. You look absolutely healthy." The way she said the last word made Diana's skin crawl. This wasn't a family visit. This was a predator circling prey. "I mean, when we arranged the marriage, we had no idea you were so accomplished," Melissa continued, her eyes openly appreciating Caleb's tall frame and perfectly tailored clothes. "So wealthy, so devastatingly handsome now that you're standing on your own 2 feet. We didn't arrange anything," Diana said sharply. "You rejected him because you thought he was beneath you." "I made a mistake," Melissa admitted with practiced humility, moving to perch on the edge of a chair without being invited. "I was young, foolish, focused on all the wrong things. But I'm here now to make amends." Caleb finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to shutting down unwanted business proposals. "Mrs. Thompson, but please, call me Melissa." She smiled in a way that had probably melted the hearts of countless men. "And I have to say, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the original arrangements." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Caleb asked, though his tone suggested he already knew where this was heading. "Well," Melissa leaned forward conspiratorially, "I was supposed to be your bride originally. Diana was just a substitute when I couldn't fulfill the contract. But now that you're walking again, now that I understand what a remarkable man you are, I think we should discuss rectifying the situation." The silence that followed was deafening. Diana felt ice form in her veins as she realized exactly what her stepsister was suggesting. "Rectifying the situation?" Caleb repeated slowly. "An annulment," Melissa said brightly, as if she were suggesting they change the dinner menu. "Diana could step aside, return to her little art career, and I could take my rightful place as your wife. Think about it. I'm beautiful, sophisticated. I know how to move in society circles. I could be the kind of wife a man of your stature deserves." Caleb was quiet for so long that Diana began to panic. Then he began to laugh, not with humor, but with the kind of cold amusement that made powerful men dangerous. "The kind of wife I deserve?" he repeated, moving to stand behind Diana's chair, his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're suggesting that my wife, the woman who loved me when I couldn't walk, who supported me through months of painful recovery, who sees value in my broken places, should step aside for you? The woman who took one look at me in a wheelchair and declared me unfit for marriage?" Melissa's confident expression began to crack. "I was protecting myself. You were protecting your image." Caleb cut her off, his voice gaining an edge that Diana had never heard before. "And now you want to waltz back into our lives because you've discovered that the man you rejected as damaged goods is actually a billionaire who can walk." "People change," Melissa said desperately. "I've grown, learned from my mistakes." "Have you?" Diana finally found her voice, standing to face her stepsister directly. "Because it sounds like the only thing that's changed is your assessment of what Caleb can offer you." "Don't be naive, Diana," Melissa snapped, her mask finally slipping. "You think this is some fairy tale? You think love conquers all? He married you because you were convenient, because you were desperate enough to accept damaged goods. But I could give him so much more." "Such as?" Caleb asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Beauty," Melissa said, gesturing to herself. "Sophistication, social connections, a wife who won't embarrass him at important functions." "Interesting," Caleb said thoughtfully. "And what exactly has given you the impression that my wife embarrasses me?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Melissa's eyes. "Well, I just assumed." "You assumed wrong," Caleb interrupted. "My wife is the most beautiful woman I've ever met, not because of how she looks, though she's absolutely stunning, but because of who she is. She's brilliant, talented, compassionate, and brave enough to love a broken man back to wholeness. He moved to stand beside Diana, taking her hand in his. She didn't marry me for money. She had no idea I was wealthy. She didn't marry me for status. She thought she was sacrificing herself for her family's debts. She married me despite every reason not to, and she loved me when I couldn't even love myself. Melissa's face flushed red with humiliation and rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Both of you. When you get tired of playing house with your little charity case, you'll remember what real beauty looks like. Get out," Diana said quietly, but her voice carried absolute finality. "Get out of our home and don't come back. This isn't over," Melissa threatened as the butler appeared to escort her out. "You think you can just steal what was meant to be mine?" "I didn't steal anything," Diana replied. "I earned it. Through love, through sacrifice, through staying when leaving would have been easier. Something you've never understood." As Melissa's angry footsteps receded through the house, Caleb pulled Diana into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "Are you all right?" he asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I think so," Diana said, though she was shaking. "It's just hard to believe we're related. How can someone be so selfish, calculating, willing to destroy other people's happiness for personal gain?" Caleb supplied. Unfortunately, wealth and success attract that kind of person. But they also show you who really matters. They had barely recovered from Melissa's visit when David Dawson arrived 3 days later, his approach much more subtle, but equally calculated. He didn't force his way in, but instead waited patiently in the sitting room, hat in hand, the picture of a repentant father seeking reconciliation. "Diana, my dear daughter," he said when she finally agreed to see him, rising from his chair with arms outstretched. "You look wonderful. Marriage clearly agrees with you." Diana didn't move into his embrace, noting how his eyes traveled around the opulent room, cataloging artwork and furniture with the practiced assessment of someone calculating value. "Dad," she said carefully, "what brings you here? One brings you here. Can't a father visit his daughter?" David asked, hurt coloring his voice. "I've missed you terribly, and I wanted to meet my son-in-law properly." Caleb entered the room at that moment, moving with the confidence of a man completely comfortable in his own space. David's eyes widened as he took in Caleb's height, his obvious health and strength, the expensive cut of his casual clothes. "Mr. Dawson," Caleb said politely, extending his hand. "I've heard a great deal about you. All good things, I hope." David laughed nervously, clearly intimidated by Caleb's presence and the obvious wealth surrounding them. "Though I have to say, I had no idea when we arranged the marriage that Diana would be so well provided for. Is that what we're calling it?" Diana asked, her voice sharp. "An arrangement, because I remember it feeling more like being sold to solve your gambling debts." David's face flushed. "Now, sweetheart, that's not fair. I was in a difficult position, trying to save our family." "Save our family?" Diana interrupted, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. "Or save yourself from the consequences of your poor choices?" "Diana, please." David tried a different approach, his voice taking on the wheedling tone she remembered from childhood. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm here now. I want to be part of your life again, part of your success." "My success?" Diana repeated. "You mean Caleb's success?" "Well, of course. His success is your success now," David said, glancing meaningfully around the room. "Your family, and family should stick together, especially when times are good." Caleb had remained silent during this exchange, but Diana could feel the tension radiating from him. When he finally spoke, his voice was deceptively calm. "Mr. Dawson, help me understand something. When you arranged your daughter's marriage to me, what did you know about my financial situation?" David shifted uncomfortably. "We were told you had inherited some money, but lived quietly because of your condition. And you thought that was sufficient for your daughter? Well, I thought it would be a comfortable life for her, David said defensively. Better than what she had. But not good enough for Melissa, Caleb observed. She rejected the arrangement because she thought I was just a disabled man with modest means. Melissa was young, confused. Melissa was honest about her priorities. Caleb cut him off. She wanted wealth and status, and she didn't think I could provide them. So you offered Diana instead. David's silence was answer enough. Diana felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, but the last chains of obligation and guilt that had bound her to this man who had never truly seen her value. You know what the cruelest part is, Dad, she said quietly. It's not that you sold me to pay your debts. It's that you thought so little of me that you believed I should be grateful for any husband at all, even one you considered damaged goods. That's not how I thought of it. That's exactly how you thought of it, Diana interrupted. You chose Melissa for the wealthy men, the successful men, the men who could give her status and beauty and everything she wanted. But me, poor Diana, could take the charity case, the disabled man you thought no one else would want. David's face crumpled as he realized his daughter had seen through every lie he'd told himself. Diana, I love you. No, she said firmly, standing to face him directly. You love what I can do for you. You love that I was quiet and compliant, that I didn't cause trouble like Melissa did. And now, you love that I'm married to a wealthy man who might be willing to help with your financial problems. But real love doesn't come with conditions, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Real love doesn't change based on bank accounts or circumstances. Real love sees value in a person just as they are. She moved to stand beside Caleb, taking his hand. Caleb taught me that. He loved me when he thought I was just a struggling artist, forced into marriage. He supported my dreams, encouraged my growth, saw potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. Diana, please. David tried one last time. I made mistakes, but family is family. We can start over, build new relationships. You're right, Diana said quietly. Family is family, and my family is here now. She gestured to Caleb, who squeezed her hand supportively. My family is the person who chose to love me, not the people who only value me when it's convenient for them. Think about what you're giving up, David pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. I'm your father. We share blood, history. We share DNA, Diana corrected. But love, respect, support, genuine care, those things are earned. And you stopped earning them the day you decided I was worth less than my stepsister. The finality in her voice seemed to reach David at last. His shoulders sagged as he realized that the daughter he'd taken for granted was truly lost to him. I suppose there's nothing more to say, he said quietly as he realized her mind was made up. No, Diana agreed. There isn't. After David left, Caleb and Diana sat together in their garden room, processing the emotional weight of the confrontations. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the same colors that had marked the beginning of their artistic journey together. Are you okay? Caleb asked, pulling her closer on the small sofa they'd moved in to create a cozy reading nook. I think so, Diana said, leaning into his warmth. It hurts, but it also feels freeing. Like I've finally stopped carrying weight that was never mine to bear. You were incredible, Caleb said, pressing a kiss to her temple. The way you stood up to them, the way you articulated exactly why their behavior was wrong. I was so proud of you. I learned from the best, Diana replied, tilting her head to look at him. You showed me what it looks like to be valued, to be cherished for who I am rather than what I can provide. Caleb was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. When your sister suggested that annulment, for just a second I wondered if maybe she was right. If maybe you deserved someone who could have loved you from the beginning, without all the complications I brought to your life. Diana turned in his arms to face him fully. Caleb Steele, don't you dare. What we have isn't complicated. It's complete. We didn't start with love. but we built it together. Day by day, choice by choice. That makes it stronger, not weaker. I know, he said, his eyes bright with emotion. I know that now, but seeing how they treated you, understanding that they were willing to throw you away like you didn't matter, it made me so angry and so grateful that their selfishness led you to me. We found each other, Diana corrected, and we chose each other. Every day since then, we've kept choosing each other. That's what real love is. Not a feeling that happens to you, but a decision you make over and over again. Caleb cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. I choose you, he said softly. Today, tomorrow, for the rest of our lives. I choose your laughter, your passion, your incredible heart. I choose building a life together that's based on love instead of obligation. I choose you too, Diana whispered. My brilliant, generous, extraordinary husband who taught me that I was worth fighting for. As they kissed in the fading light, surrounded by canvases that told the story of their journey from strangers to soulmates, both knew they had found something precious and rare. They had created a family built on choice rather than blood, on love rather than convenience, on mutual respect and genuine care. The people who had tried to use them, manipulate them, and control them were no longer part of their story. What remained was pure and strong and beautiful, a love that had been tested and proven, a partnership that had overcome every obstacle placed in its path. Tomorrow, they would return to their easels and create new art together. They would plan the foundation they wanted to establish for spinal cord research. They would continue building the life they had chosen, surrounded by beauty and filled with purpose. But tonight, they simply held each other and marveled at how much their world had changed since that first awkward meeting in the garden room. They had both been broken when they found each other, Tim by trauma and isolation, her by family rejection and self-doubt. Together, they had become whole. My dear family, Diana and Caleb's story teaches us that our worth isn't determined by how others treat us. It's determined by how we choose to see ourselves and who we allow into our hearts. Real love doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't change when circumstances shift. It sees potential where others see problems, and it chooses to stay through every season. As you go to bed tonight, I want you to remember that you are not damaged goods. You are not a consolation prize. You are worthy of a love that celebrates you, supports your dreams, and sees your true value. Don't settle for people who only want you when it's convenient for them. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. When you leave our stories like that, you discourage me. It costs you nothing to hit the subscribe button and like this video. Now you've done that, I'll see you in our next story.